Good evening. Welcome to the June 6th meeting of the Salt Lake City Historic Landmarks Commission. We have one announcement that might be relevant to some of you out here. And Michaela?
Just wanted to announce that Salt Lake City Department of Public Utilities requested yesterday afternoon to postpone the public hearing for the pump house on the 4th Avenue well scheduled for tonight. And the reason being is that on Tuesday night, the Salt Lake City Council unanimously voted to approve the funding for the well contingent on certain additional work and evidence and consulting work to be presented, such as alternatives that public utilities looked at, et cetera, and that public utilities is working on compiling that information for City Council. So they did decide to postpone that item this evening until that is resolved. So it could be this fall. We're not sure, but that item will not be on the agenda this evening. Planning tried to make sure that we changed our agenda, posted the site, sent out notice on Constant Contact. That's sort of a listserv that goes out. So if any folks are here and didn't hear about that item being postponed, apologies for that, but I did want to announce that this evening.
Good. Thank you, Michaela. So I'd like to start by reading a statement regarding the Historic Landmarks Commission and what we do in our process. And it says, the Historic Landmarks Commission is made up of citizens of the city who are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. The commission primarily does three things. One, we make recommendations to the city council on policies and ordinances related to preservation in Salt Lake City. This includes the designation of local historic districts and landmark sites. Two, as a certified local government, provide input to the Utah State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, regarding National Register nominations within the city. And three, we are also charged with reviewing and making decisions on land use applications for properties that are located within the Historic Preservation Overlay District. This includes design review of building alterations, demolitions, economic hardship requests, construction of new buildings, special exceptions, and historic building relocation. It is up to the applicant to present their project and provide evidence that shows how their project complies with the specific standards of review. The planning staff is here to let us know why we are reviewing an application, what standards we need to use in making a decision, and point out the key issues. The role of you, as the public, is to help us identify the issues and impacts of a proposed project and provide input on how you think the project complies with or does not comply with the standards of review for which the Historic Landmarks Commission has authority over. On items where the City Council is the decision maker, opinions may be considered. Our goal is to have a welcoming and safe environment for everyone. To reach that goal, we ask that those in attendance adhere to a few ground rules. Silence or turn off your cell phones. Respect the person speaking and do not interrupt, cheer, clap, boo, or do other things that could intimidate or deter others from exercising their right to be heard. You may be asked to leave the meeting if your actions discourage others from engaging the commission. If you wish to speak, you will be called up, then come to the microphone and state your name. You have 2 minutes to get your thoughts out. Your time cannot be combined with someone else's time. Everyone will get the same amount of time to speak so that we can ensure everyone is treated equally. If you have a handout that you want the commission to see, you need to leave copies because they become part of the legal record. And last, please keep your comments on topic and succinct. Thank you. All right. To get this going, we started with a field trip tonight. Some of our members went to look at the two sites of items that are still on the agenda. And then the commission had dinner down below, a fine dinner from City Bird Cafe, can highly recommend it. But no commission business was discussed at that time. Our first issue is to approve the minutes for April 4th, 2019. Has everyone had a chance to read through those? And if so, would someone care to make a motion? Very good. We have a motion.
Of the last meeting.
Okay. Can we get a second on that, please?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from April 4th. Can we take a vote, please, starting with you, Charles? David?
David? Abstain, I was not present at that meeting.
Aye. Aye.
Esther, aye.
Abstain. Aye.
Adams, aye.
Okay, those minutes are approved. Let's do the same for May 2nd, please. Can we have a motion and a second, please?
I move that we approve those minutes for May 2nd.
Okay. Do we have a second for the second?
Second.
We can probably do a voice vote. All in favor of approving?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Minutes for May 2nd are approved as well. Report of the chair and the vice chair. I don't have anything to report, but I'd ask Charles to make a statement.
Just a quick explanation. A couple of years ago, the city sponsored a window rehabilitation workshop presented by Bob Yap, who is quite a knowledgeable and experienced building preservation guru. And this week, they've been having another set of workshops. We've been hosting them at the university in the historic Stewart building. If you're interested in seeing a renovated 100-year-old double-hung window that moves up and down just like it's supposed to, you're welcome to come up. Give me a call, and I'll arrange to get you into the location where it is. It's worth the experience just to see it moving up and down, gliding the way it's supposed to.
Thanks, Charles. Vice chair is not present, so presumably he has nothing to say. Michaela, do you have anything for us?
I don't have anything to report. Charles beat me to it. No, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Then we will move into the public hearings. As was stated, the 4th Ave Pump House is postponed, so we will move directly to item number 2, painted.
Do you want to have any general public
General
comment?
public. Good point. I've always forgot that. Is there any members of the public who wish to speak on any items that are not specifically addressed on tonight's agenda? Very well. Then let us move into item number 2 on our agenda. And thank you. Please proceed.
Up here. Yeah, how do I start the slide?
Myra, we have a lot of white noise from the blower over here, so if you could get the microphone close and
Okay.
talk loud, thanks.
All right. Notes. Good evening. This request was made by Natalie Johnson, representing the property owner, to approve paint already applied to 3 facades of the masonry building located at 171 West, 300 North. The building is a walk-up apartment with brick on all facades and flagstone highlighting the entrances. It was constructed in 1950 and is an example of a post-war modern architecture style. The building is considered contributing to the Capitol Hill Local Historic District. And that's the front facade of the building before the paint was applied. The paint was applied to the front and side facades of the building and to the flagstone on the 2 entrances. The rear facade was left unpainted. So I'll go back. This one, you can see the front and one of the sides. This one is the corner side, also facing the street and the rear of the building. The work was carried out without a certificate of appropriateness, and the decision now is being referred to this commission because staff concludes that the paint does not comply with standards of review and adversely affect the historic district. The city's adopted design guidelines for historic apartments and multifamily buildings and design guidelines for historic residential properties specifically state that painting masonry that was not painted traditionally should be avoided. Paint obscures the character of the building, which is in its form as much as it is in the construction material. The color of the brick in contrast with the light mortar and the stone reflects the traditional masonry construction of historic apartment buildings in the city and contributes to historic character of the neighborhood. Paint also causes extensive damages to the masonry over time because it traps moisture that would naturally evaporate from the material. This deterioration puts at risk the integrity of the building and to the masonry itself. So based on the analysis and the findings outlined in my staff report, I'm recommending that the commission deny the request.
I have a question.
Yes, please go
So
ahead.
you've talked about the harm that can occur to the building because of the paint kind of trapping moisture. What harm is there to the building in removing the paint?
They would have to get a certificate of appropriateness for that too, and we would
No,
review.
you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Sorry, I wasn't clear. What I mean is, does it hurt the building physically to have that paint taken off?
That's where I was going to get. So we would review what process they're proposing to do that.
But is there a process where it
Is
won't hurt it?
There's a process. It requires care. It requires someone with knowledge. We don't allow anything abrasive. It would.
How do you get it off without abrasion?
So we
Wow.
have some paint solvents, and it's a chemical process. But
And
yeah,
do the
so
chemicals harm the mortar or the
that's what
brick?
we would review. What kind of chemicals are they proposing? If it's abrasive, no, then we wouldn't allow that.
Are there any chemicals that can be used that would not be abrasive that you're aware of?
Yes.
There's
Okay.
citrus strippers and other chemicals that I think some of our architects
That going to
could
work
speak
to get a bunch of paint off a building? You're nodding, yeah?
It
Okay.
does work. It does work.
Okay.
A lot of oranges, though, squeezing them over that. Yeah.
May I ask if the city law enforcement or any code enforcement people have done anything to the people who did this?
Yeah, so they came to us as a result of enforcement. So we're working with them, while we're working with them to get this issue resolved, enforcement won't do anything. So,
But I mean,
Action will-
if we deny this thing and say we don't like it, it still looks like that way tomorrow and the next day. Who forces them to clean it up?
that will be the city enforcement division, and we do have fines for that.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions for staff? No? Okay. Thank you. Oh, do you know? Oh,
Did you question at all whether this building was contributing?
Yeah, it is a contributing building.
Do you?
Oh, questioning the fact that it's contributing?
Yeah. Certainly, it's not from the period of significance for Marmalade, right?
Do you want, I don't.
Paul, it must be from the expanded period of significance. I think if I'm not mistaken, Michaela, when the 2 districts were reevaluated, the period of significance expanded. So,
I have the ones with listing, yeah, if it's contributing or not, but I don't know. what
And
you
it was
mean.
listed as EC.
Yes,
So in our latest survey, it was listed as eligible contributing.
But, I mean, we've all seen mistakes in those before. I mean, it would really help me to know for certain that a 1950s build is within a period of significance. When I look at around Marmalade, this is not enigmatic of that district.
Address it.
I haven't personally questioned that.
Yeah,
and-
so-
And that's not the question in front of us this evening.
Yeah, so I don't think we do that. I think if the applicant wanted to question the eligibility of the building, they would have to apply for an interpretation. But as far as what they have proposed, this is treated as a contributing building.
Is that binding on us? I assume we have the jurisdiction to question that.
Stumped him on that one.
I think for starters, Paul, we wouldn't be able to do that tonight because that's not something that was noticed on the agenda as a determination of whether it's contributing. That's a good question. I need to think about
I think that is,
how we would approach that moving forward.
Okay, other questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here, and would the applicant like to come forward and speak to us? If so, please do.
Flash driver said we could provide some slides. Just to check yours.
Sorry, I didn't know you had something.
No worries.
Here on the side here.
Where is it? Perfect. Okay. We have a prepared statement, so I'll just read that and we can go from there.
Would you state your name, please?
Yeah. Chris Turner with Preserve Partners, the owner of the property.
And
Natalie Johnson, also with Preserve Partners.
thank you. Please proceed.
Certainly. Chairperson and committee, thank you for your time and attention in caring for the built environment of Salt Lake City. Our intention is to improve properties and create sustainable living environments for residents in the Salt Lake community. Throughout our ownership of the Arches since 2015, we have been improving the building's neglected mechanical interior needs and take a sense of responsibility in doing so. To further this improvement, we decided to apply exterior paint that would revive the property's appearance without any intention of distracting from or otherwise degrading the architectural context of the property. In fact, of the apartments we own in downtown Salt Lake, the Arches happens to be one of the newer ones. We are currently underway on a substantial interior-exterior preservation of the Hillcrest Apartments, a century-old 111-unit apartment building on First Ave, and at the Kensington Apartments, another century-old property consisting of 64 units, at 180 North Main Street. We are adding a new roof and installing air conditioning for residents to withstand the summer months. Clearly, historic rehabilitation work is our passion, and we take seriously the commitment to preserving its character. Ultimately, it is within our name. In an effort to do things right, we frankly made a mistake in the interpretation that was provided by your staff. Knowing that the property was not a landmark site specifically, we were incorrect specifically in our interpretation of the Arches' contributing status within the Capitol Hill Historic Overlay. Upon our review of the zoning code, in the context of a non-landmark but still contributing site, it being older than 50 years apparently, we did not see the painting as a description per Chapter 21A-34-020-E Certificate of Appropriateness required of the zoning code that warranted a certificate of appropriateness. Further, in the same chapter, Section G, standards for certificate of appropriateness for altercation of an existing landmark site of contributing structure, et cetera, Item 9, contemporary design for alterations and additions to existing properties shall not be discouraged when such alterations and additions do not destroy significant cultural, historical, architectural, or archaeological material, and such design is compatible with the size, scale, color, material, and character of the property, neighborhood, or environment. This gave us reason to believe that painting the exterior would not be in violation of the code. It is worth noting that other properties of much older vintage, arguably of much more significant historical nature, have been painted, including the property directly to the south of the arches that is now a light blue color, and this reinforced our interpretation of painting the property as a non-issue. Working with historical properties is something we take seriously, and as such, we have spent our own resources to find an appropriate method of removal and have had a small area of paint removed as a sample. Unfortunately, this process is far from perfect, leaving a significant amount of white paint still in the brick, and as such, we have not had any contractor willing to formally bid. Here's some example for you. We have not had any contractor willing to formally bid the project, as the finished project would actually not resemble the original brick without being further in violation of the code, i.e. using chemicals or sandblasting, which again is in the zoning code as we read it. The process is so prohibitively expensive, upwards of $80,000 for this job roughly, as we can estimate, or more than basically 10 times what we spent to paint it in the first place. And while we have goals of refurbishing the original Joanne sign, which is something that we actually do feel has some historical, colloquial nature on the property, this cost would simply be prohibitive, and we wouldn't be able to move forward with doing so, let alone really any considerable maintenance, considering the cost of what it would cost to remove. We see the need of quality housing as paramount to the community's continued success, and know the importance of providing physical environments that bestow a sense of place to us all. By rehabilitating older, obsolescent properties, we are hoping to do our part in creating better places that are more affordable alternative for people to live in, but spending tens of thousands of dollars to remove paint is at worst an inefficient use of resources, and at best an extremely harsh penalty, especially when the end product will still not likely be what was there before. We realize that we have made, in your eyes, a mistake, one that, as a former student of the City and Metropolitan Planning Department at the U, just a few blocks away, I hope will not soon be forgotten. As we continue to rehab historical properties in the city, we hope to be a champion of the Commission and very much want to work together in solving this matter. With that, we very much appreciate your time and welcome any questions or comments.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions for the applicant?
So on these two slides here, these two pictures, the one on the left, what did you do, what process did you use to expose that amount of the brick?
So we used, Mayara contacted SHPO and got some suggestions on how we could remove the paint. There was one specific one, the PR, it's like Procelco, I'm not sure how to say it, which is a chemical that's supposed to remove the paint without damaging the brick. So we applied that, left it, used steam to try to get it off, applied more. So we went through that process several times. The painter that painted it for us said that he had back rolled it into you can see this is the brick that's very textured, and that he had back rolled it very much into that to get a good finish on it, and that he didn't feel like we'd be able to get it off effectively. But we used the process that was suggested by SHPO.
And so that was, is mine on? Yes. That was, you did the test application?
I had a contractor come out and do that for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
A painting contractor or someone with experience with stripping
Yes.
the paint? Okay.
Yes.
The other question I had, kind of follow-up, was did you do any test stripping of the stone at the entries to the entrance?
We did not.
Okay.
Other questions for the applicant?
Is the structure of the building a stick frame, or I assume it's not a masonry building? The brick is not holding the building up. It's just a veneer, right?
Oh, right, right.
Stick frame.
It is
inside?
frame, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And cinder.
David, you're looking thoughtful over there. Nothing? Tom?
So a question on sustainability. In your mind, which is more sustainable, brick that's been painted or brick that's unpainted?
Yeah, in my opinion, I had no idea until I read the statement that painting brick would.
I didn't ask that.
Oh,
You
sorry.
say that your company is involved in sustainable practices.
Yes.
In upgrading buildings. So what is it that about painting a brick that is sustainable?
Well,
So I think I know what I can understand what you're asking here. What's sustainable here is, I mean, frankly, reflectivity. So it's not absorbing as much heat for residents per se. What I also do believe is that I don't think there's any difference between not painting it, and the process to remove is certainly less sustainable than to keep it there at this point.
Well, with the brick is painted, how long does a paint job last? How often do you repaint a painted building?
I mean, it's certainly a long-term item. We would have to go back and discuss with an expert on the issue to give you an exact time frame.
Well, in the reserve study, would it be 7 years? Would it be 10 years?
Oh, it'd
20
certainly
years?
be 10, 20, 30. I mean, it'd be a very long-term CapEx item.
How long would that brick last without being painted?
Again, in the long term.
Indefinitely, right?
To the degree that the property is occupiable.
Right, right. Okay, thank you.
All right. I think that's all the questions we've got right now. Thank you very much. You may take your seats.
Thank you.
We do have a couple of comment cards. I'd like to call Cindy Cromer. Would you come forth and speak, please?
Okay, yeah.
I had not planned, my name is Cindy Cromer, and I had not planned to speak on this item because I thought it was going to be more straightforward than it is. But this is a raked face brick, apparently, and I do have experience with raked face brick, and that is complicating the situation considerably. I would not be comfortable accepting a contractor application for paint removal unless it was one of the recognized experts. Those are identifiable. I'm not going to speak about their names publicly, but they are well known in this community. They are well recognized, and there's more than one. And unless they did the work, I probably would say not good enough. The rake face brick is a complicating factor for two reasons. One is that it's more vulnerable for freeze thaw, and so the fact that this has now been painted makes the water, it's more difficult to water to get out, and it was already a problem because it's a rake face brick, and in the property I owned with a rake face brick, the facing falls off as it's exposed to freeze thaw. So this made a vulnerable brick more vulnerable. And that's highly problematic. And it's also very, very much harder to remove the paint from a rake face brick. So this is really a double whammy in terms of trying to find a way through this. I think it's absolutely essential to have a test sample by a highly qualified contractor on the stonework. It really has removed the character of this building by painting the stone. And I think that's essential before you make a decision, is to get a test strip on the stone. Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah Schultz, please.
Hi. First of all, I've never made a public comment before on something like this, so I ask your patience, but I just wanted to say I live around the corner from the building and
Would you state your name for us, please?
Oh, sorry. Yes, my name is Sarah Schultz, and I live on the same block as this property. I live around the corner. I just wanted to state that, my sadness when I realized that the building was being painted as they started it. It has changed from a historic-looking building to a modern-looking building. I am not wholly against modernization, but I do feel like it has significantly changed the character of the building. And while I acknowledge that my neighbor to the south, who lives a couple doors down from me, did paint her house bright blue, I do not know if that building has historic status or not, as many homes and buildings on our block have mixed statuses. Some are new, some are old, and I don't know what the best remediation for this is, whether it should be approved or not, but I just wanted to say that it was very sad indeed to see such beautiful brick being painted over. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Right. If no more comment cards for that, would the applicant like to return to respond to any of those? You don't need to if you don't wish.
I think one point that I just want to make clear as well is that we certainly want to work with the commission to find something, whether that is understanding, going back to see what we may or may not have done to using a best contract or a best practice or an otherwise better material, i.e. removing what's there on the stone on the facade just around the doorways, for example. The dialogue has been clear that it's maybe not that clear, and so we certainly want to also voice that we want to see if there's some way we can work through that with those that might have further expertise in the field. That's all.
Good. Thank you. All right. At this point, we'll close the public comment session and go into executive session. And commissioners, who would like to start? Charles, you're pulling that up to...
Maybe just to make observation, cleaning paint from masonry, cleaning masonry in general, historic masonry is challenging. This brick is challenging, I think, for a variety of reasons. The textured primary amongst them, I think. The painting of the stone is a parallel issue that we ought to be thinking about here. But I do appreciate the recommendation that was stated here from the public about test stripping by experienced masonry cleaning contractors, with those experience to see what's feasible, either on both materials.
I like that idea a lot. I just wanted to add that I wish we had the option of a fine, because I'm concerned that ultimately we're going to end up doing more damage than good by having it stripped. But I also don't want to set a precedent that people can just paint it and say, whoops, it's too damaging to remove it, so now you're stuck with it.
Right.
So I'm not sure if a fine is an option, but I think that might be a deterrent to people from doing this in the future. But on the other hand, it sounds like they did it without realizing. So I don't know. I think it's complicated because I think you might be damaging it more if you remove it.
Yeah. I think in that cleaning process, they can test for, whether the porosity of the brick has been increased by the cleaning process and things like that. So I think there's evaluations that can be made that can hopefully inform the longevity of either solution.
Or maybe we need to table it and get more information.
If we do that, who gets the information that we want?
It needs to be brought back to the commission, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, Stanley, I believe we'd ask him to bring it back to us, and we'd open the discussion again, I believe.
Because it's their appeal.
Yeah.
I have to say that I think there's a real issue with fairness in the way this ordinance is enforced. I think if you were to do a survey of Salt Lake's historic districts, that you would find every bit as many, if not more, masonry buildings that have been painted than are not, and none of them are being basically hit with a really, really costly enforcement action. And I also think that the city has not done a good job of communicating that this is apparently an inflexible policy. I've heard the city say many, many times that historic landmarks does not affect an owner's ability to choose a color of a building. And I've heard that many times from city officials. And I think it would be reasonable to interpret that as giving permission to paint.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
So-
It's really difficult to hear with this air conditioner.
What's that?
Can you repeat what you said that you've heard?
I've heard city officials say many, many times that the historic landmark ordinance does not prevent owners from changing the color of their building. And I think it would be totally reasonable to interpret that statement as permitting paint of a brick building. So I also am really appreciative of the contrition that the applicant has expressed. I mean, they're not coming in here and telling us that we're wrong or that the city's wrong. I think they've just stated that they made a mistake and they're going to do other buildings and they're not going to paint. So for me, I find it very hard to envision requiring them to remove that paint. Maybe the stone, especially given I'd be open to seeing what the test results are, but I have a suspicion that the removal effort is not going to be that effective anyway, given the type of brick it is. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
I'm having difficulty, though, because by their own admission, they never asked. These are people whose name is preserved. They're not strangers to asking permission rather than forgiveness. So while I align with Shelley in this, I'm a West Side resident, and it's a little bit of open season right now in trying to claim properties and do what needs to be done. We're losing Bishop Place because people are claiming West Side properties and asking forgiveness rather than permission. And I'm a little worried about the precedent that it sets. Ordinance aside, Paul, I think you're absolutely correct. There is a need for clarity. And I don't know that stripping this will work. But I don't think this is a very good precedent to say, okay, JK, LOL, do better next time.
Just one other thing that I forgot to mention. To me, the strict application of the design guideline makes a lot more sense to me when the building itself is a masonry structure, where if the brick fails, the building will collapse. And we have a lot of those buildings. I live in one of them. And I did the very expensive paint removal process in my house. But here, where it is just a veneer, where the failing of the exterior will not affect the integrity of the building. It can just be replaced or fixed. To me, is a consideration.
Is it a veneer, though? Did they do veneers in the 50s?
Well, that was why I asked whether it was a...
You're saying, like there's an interior structure, but it really is just a veneer?
It may be a full brick, but its purpose is not to hold up the building.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. We can't, none of us have X-ray vision. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a URM, though, in there. And I think, though, the issue isn't if the building's going to fall down, if the brick fails, if the face of the brick fails. I think it's the lack of preservation of that brick face and the deterioration that causes. I think we had the comments again from the public about this brick, brick like this, I should say, not necessarily this brick, surface spalling under freeze-thaw conditions. And so I think I'm going to go back to I think the recommendation should be let's get good professional information here on what has the paint done to the brick. I think that's one question. It's kind of nice that we have in a way. The back of the building that hasn't been painted, it can be tested. The painted brick can be tested. The painted brick can be test stripped and tested. The stone can be tested or stripped and tested. Not onerous efforts, and I think that information could help inform what decision comes back out.
Esther, do you have any comments on this one?
So I agree with what everything has been said. I think I'm leaning more toward having it removed because I've seen it done. And I know it's red brick, but the particular property that it comes to mind is also red brick, and it was done by one person. It was his home. And so I know that it can be done. It might just be time consuming and expensive, but like Victoria and Shelley mentioned, I don't want to be part of a process where we're setting a precedent for other people to come and have, make the same mistake and then us okay it.
Thank you. Stanley?
I'm kind of concerned about us being thought of as setting a precedent if we approve this painting. I think the precedent that needs to be worked on is the city enforcing its rules and regulations before it gets to this place. And I'm a little like Paul and some others maybe. I think I'll never be happy seeing this building stripped down. I think that's almost a waste of time and money. We'll never have what was there, so I'd rather look at what we can do to make it as best as we can, if anything. But I'm disappointed that we're even hearing this painting thing. This is an enforcement situation that should have been stopped before it got to this commission, in my opinion. And we're not setting any precedent by trying to help some developers that obviously are going in the right direction in life in their business pursuits, and getting something out of this, because it just gets to be a bigger problem and expense and for everybody, including the precedent people. It just shouldn't ever get here. Now that it is, let's make the best we can of it. That's the way I look at it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
If I could speak to precedent.
Please do.
I've just been informed that the building across the street is being enforced on for exactly the same thing.
Right.
And to speak to Commissioner Adams about the city's enforcement, certainly, I probably stated this at other meetings, the city doesn't go around necessarily and look for zoning enforcement cases. Okay, we are informed from the public to check into zoning enforcement or building enforcement cases. We do not have the resources to go block by block, street by street to enforce on folks.
Could I just add to that? On the same note, we look at the cases case by case, so we can't really just blanket agree on every case. It's just this is what we're seeing right now, and based on this particular case, this is how I feel about what's being presented here is, yes, a mistake was made, but given what we have to review this on, I don't think it should move forward as is. It needs to be fixed.
So I'll make a motion then. In the
Hang
case
on
of,
just a second, Shelley. Tom, do you want to jump in on anything? Thanks.
No, I don't, actually.
Okay. All right, Shelley.
okay, so in the case of PLN HLC 2019-132, I move that we table this appeal until we get more information about the viability of paint removal on the brick facade and also on the stone facade. Was there anything else that we needed?
I'll pile onto that. I think it should be by a qualified
Yes.
masonry contractor. And I looked on Preservation Utah's website. They have a directory of resources. There were 4 masonry contractors listed on there. I recognized 2 of them. So I would imagine that maybe one or more of those people could write a report.
So I'd accept that amendment, that the evaluations need to be done by someone qualified.
Qualified meaning people that have experience removing paint from raked brick.
Yeah, I accept that.
Okay.
And can you give them a little bit more direction in what you're looking for in, certainly you've got qualified contractor, what,
Just a report on whether it is viable to and possible to remove the paint without harming the underlying stone or brick. I mean, I don't think that cost needs to be our concern, but we do need to know whether this can work. I mean, if the paint's been,
Shelley, if it helps, while we're doing this, I texted one of the names on that list, and I asked the question, can paint be removed from raked brick? And the mason responded, yes.
okay.
I think
I don't know if it's specific to this
Here's the
building
thing, I don't know that
or
we can
that
take
type or whatever.
testimony outside of the meeting.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that'd be my concern. I think we can certainly ask for information on the viability and the methodology of doing that removal from someone who's qualified in doing this type of removal from historic structures.
Shelley, can I offer an amendment that it include test stripping from those two
Yes,
masonry
I would
materials?
accept that amendment as
Okay.
well.
all right, do we have a succinct
We do,
motion
we're looking
here?
for a second.
I second
Okay.
it.
Very good. We have a motion and a second on a tabling of this issue. We'll take a vote. I will start on my right.
Aye.
Shepherd, aye.
Brennan, aye.
No.
Esther, aye.
Victoria, I.
Harding, aye.
Adams, aye.
So that motion passes with one dissension, and so it will proceed to a tabling, and we would ask you to seek that information, work with the staff on any details or questions that might bring up, and then we will look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Okay. Next item is case PLN APP 2018-00811, special exception appeal at approximately 55 North Virginia Street. Take it away, please.
Which plug? I don't know. Which, they don't match. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Which one was I supposed to unplug and replug? Yeah. That's one, okay. Oh, it just showed up. And right before you unplugged it again. Okay. All right. We'll get there. Okay. All right.
That's ironic.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, the painted parts on my brick house are holding up much better than the unpainted parts.
Oh, really? I don't have brick. Lighting.
No, my brick parts are fantastic. It's the exposed parts that are falling off on the chimney.
Sorry for the delay there. Thank you. So this is an appeal for 55 North Virginia Street. I also wanted to note that there was one additional public comment that was added to your Dropbox folder just prior to the meeting. So this is an appeal of an administrative COA, an administrative special exception. It's a special exception for the replacement of a non-complying accessory structure and additional height.
and also a COA for the replacement garage and then the related improvements. The COA and special exception were originally approved in 2016, and then the approval expired, and a new application was submitted and approved in 2018. An appeal was submitted within the 10-day appeal period. Sorry, just getting a little confused there. So the property is located at the, I think I deleted a slide. I had a location slide in there. The property is located at the northwest corner of Virginia and First Avenue. The front of the house faces Virginia Street, and then the garage is located in the northwest corner of the property. And then the appellant's property is located to the west. So on this slide here, the top photo shows the front of the garage facing west towards the rear of the property, and then the bottom photo is taken from the sidewalk on First Avenue, and you can see the garage and the proximity to the principal structure on the appellant's property. So as I mentioned earlier, the request is for the replacement of the existing non-complying accessory structure and also additional height. The existing garage is located approximately 3 feet from the neighboring property. It appears to be constructed on the property line. The applicant is requesting a total height of 17 feet, which is approximately 2 feet taller than the existing structure and is a little over the existing 14 feet that's permitted in SR1A. The existing garage is approximately 19.5 feet by 25 feet, and then the proposed is 20 by 25, both of which are slightly over the maximum 480 feet that's permitted. And then the existing wall height is between 7 and 8 feet, and then the proposed is 10 feet. Going back to the appellant's property, the left photo shows the rear extension of the garage and the existing retaining wall. And then the right photo shows the principal structure on the left and the existing garage and the retaining wall on the right. There's approximately 3 feet between the two. The appellant has had the property surveyed, and the survey showed that the property line is approximately 1 foot to the east of the current wall. You can see that with the stake and the orange flag in the photo on the left. Any boundary survey issue is a matter between the two property owners, not the city, and the city would require any work that is done to be done on the applicant's property. This is the applicant's 2016 site plan that shows the location of the proposed garage on the property. And then elevations that show a maximum height for the garage of 17 feet, and then a wall height of 10 feet. Then you can see in the lower right that the back of the wall is sloped to approximately the back 6.5 feet of the structure, and that's sloped downward to lessen the impact to the neighboring property and also have more of a similar appearance to the existing structure. So as far as considerations for the commission this evening, the administrative decision is appealed to the Historic Landmark Commission. The appeal is de novo. We're starting from the beginning, so the commission can review all aspects of the decision and make conditions that are applicable to the proposal. Another thing is to consider whether there's compliance with the special exception for replacement of a non-complying accessory structure and request for additional height, and is there any new non-compliance? I don't want to go through every single one of these, but I wanted to highlight that these are the two special exception standards. The first for accessory building height, and then the second for replacement of a non-complying accessory structure. And as far as key issues of the appeal, there's a question, the appellant is stating that the garage addition should not be included, that there's substantial impairment of property value. Things to consider here are that the garage is existing and that the extension was likely added later, but has been there for quite some time and is accessed from the interior of the garage. Staff's contention is that it is part of the footprint of the garage and that including it does not create a new impact on the property. The second issue is that the application is unclear and misleading, and staff contends that the application did not accurately describe the project. The appellant contends that the application did not accurately describe the project and the area to be replaced. The staff's contention is that the required notice procedure was followed as part of the application and that the generally flat-roofed portion of the garage is part of the structure. And then the third issue for the appeal is process clarification. And the appellant contends that the negative impacts were not considered, and then it's unclear as to whether the 2016 modifications were carried forward, and staff stating that the 2018 approval is the same as the 2016 approval. I did want to point out a few additional considerations, the first being location. In the period since the decision was issued and come to this hearing, we have had some discussions with the appellant and the applicant. And the applicant has stated that he is willing to place the retaining wall on the east side of the property line and then have a 1-foot setback from that property line. As far as height, the applicant has stated that he's willing to construct it to a maximum height of 15 feet with a wall height of 8 feet. And then as far as bulk, any additional area to the structure could be accommodated with a special exception that the Historic Landmark Commission has for bulk standards. And then also wanted to note that the retaining wall was not included as part of the certificate of appropriateness. And so as part of any approval, I'd recommend including approval for a 4-foot retaining wall along the rear property line that's consistent with the existing wall, and it also meets the residential design guidelines. And then just wanted to mention again that the boundary survey that was completed is a civil matter between the two parties and not one that will be considered by the city. So are there any questions for staff at this point?
Kenton? Sarah, can you go back to the retaining wall? Because we had that discussion on site, and now I think I heard it differently. Were you encouraging that the retaining wall be part of any decision this evening, or was it to be noted that the retaining wall will be a future application?
Sure. So what I was stating was that a retaining wall along the rear property line, so the one that would be next to the garage, was included as part of a decision tonight, but the retaining wall along the sidewalk on First Avenue could be part of a later minor alteration application.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you repeat what you said about some discussions and negotiations on size and heights, please?
Sure. Let me see if I can. I didn't have too many details on there. So as far as location, we talked with the applicant, and so the location would be that the retaining wall would be built on the east side, so on his side of the property. And then the applicant has said they'd use an 8-inch concrete block for the wall, and then set back the garage a foot from the edge of that concrete block wall. So that would be the location. As far as height, the applicant has stated that he is willing to have a maximum height of 15 feet, so to the peak of the roof. And then the wall height right now is proposed at 10 feet, and so that he'd be willing to decrease the wall height to 8 feet. And then, as we just stated, have the retaining wall have that maximum height of 4 feet along the rear property line.
And Sarah, would that, in that agreement or proposed agreement situation, is the ridge height still a special exception, but not the wall height at that point?
It's basically consistent with the existing accessory structure. So I don't think there would need to be a special exception for additional height, because it would just be the replacement of the non-complying accessory structure.
Okay.
So, okay, just make sure I'm understanding. So height would not require a special exception, overall height then, nor would wall height. What part of that would still require a special exception?
The replacement of the non-complying accessory structure and its distance from the principal structure on the adjacent property. There's a requirement that the structure be 10 feet from the principal structure on the adjacent property, and it would still be less than 10 feet from that structure.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, the revised proposal, the height of the ridge would be the same as the height of the ridge now?
Correct.
What about the shed?
Mm-hmm.
How does the proposed compare to the existing condition?
So the rear of the garage, So the proposed would have that maximum height of 15 feet, and then it would taper, as you can see on this elevation drawing, in the last 6.5 feet of it. And so the roof that's there right now is generally flat, so it would be a little bit taller than what's there right now. But it would still be probably 2 or 3 feet shorter than the special exception that was approved.
Do you have any idea how much, where the shed roof meets the gable, how much higher that point is than what's there now?
Paul,
A foot or two?
if you look on page 30 of the staff report, it appears on the existing garage that the gable is 8 feet above grade at that back addition, if that helps answer your question, assuming that is accurate.
And you're saying that the roof is essentially flat, so it's 8 feet
Yeah, so the
plus a little.
slope, but the gable is it appears to be an extension of the 8-foot existing wall height of the original garage.
Got it. Okay. No, that's
So-
helpful. Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
So is what's being proposed with this current negotiated, or maybe that's not the right word, but the changes that have been discussed, how does the overall size of that compare to existing? Is the footprint the same and then shifted? Or is the
Correct.
footprint reduced? Same and shifted. Height is the same.
Same.
The depth of the shed portion is the same.
Yes.
So it's almost like they're just rebuilding what's there, but pushing it back a couple of feet.
I haven't talked in detail with the applicant on how they would accommodate that. It's a fairly tight space between the back of the applicant's house and the front of the garage, and I'm not sure how much room they have to move it forward from where it is right now.
I guess what I'm trying to work around to is trying to figure out how this is different than what's there.
Well, it was higher, both in terms of ridge point and wall height.
But not anymore.
Exactly. When the proposal was
Right.
made. Now, it seems like it's, if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like it's essentially a pretty much an identical redo of what's there with a slight change to the shed roof.
Correct.
Good, thank you. You stated it more clearly than I did. Okay.
Can I just clarify too, though, that the staff report is supporting the previous two administrative approvals. The other consideration slide and what you're discussing right now, Sarah just wanted to bring to your attention as options and discussion points. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I mean,
because I was
Okay.
going to say, we don't have drawings
Right.
of what's been discussed, so we cannot, and so it's not really on the table. We need to address what we have as part of the application.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yes.
Other questions for staff? Thank you, Sarah. Would the applicant come forward, please? Please state your name for the record.
My name is Sean Robinson. I'm here with my wife, Erica Livingston, my son in the back, and we live at 55 North Virginia Street.
Can you speak into the microphone, sir? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson and members of the Commission. I want to give everyone a little bit of background because this is something I've been working on for a long time. I started talking with the Planning Commission and members of the Preservation Committee in 2015. I met with Carl Leith, with Anthony Reeder, with Kelsey Lindquist. They came out, as you could see in one of the pictures, The retaining wall is actually starting to lean in towards Ms. Shaw's home. The garage and the retaining wall have been there since at least 1950. The home was constructed in 1926, and the garage and retaining wall are there in 1950 on the Sanborn map. And so they're old. We've done our best to keep them up, but they're failing. And so I went to the city to explain the situation. The city wanted plans, and specifically Mr. Leith wanted us to do everything we could to maintain the historical integrity. And so we submitted plans. The initial plans back in 2016 were what requested the 17-foot roof. Thereafter, the city indicated it wanted a 15-foot roof. It wanted it the same as it was, essentially, the same footprint. So we actually resubmitted plans, and it's my understanding, and I may be mistaken, but the certificate or the approval and the certificate of appropriateness from 2016, I thought were for a roof of 15 feet. The back portion of the garage, I couldn't tell in looking at the Sanborn map if it was there, but it's been there the garage has been there for probably 70 to 90 years, and that other portion I think has probably been there for at least 50 years. So I had a number of plans drawn up, I spent a lot of money to do it, so that the city would approve it. And again, I was very careful, submitted, I'm not sure if it would be hundreds of pages of plans, but all kinds of plans. And as I indicated, it was approved in 2016. My contractor at the time, it was just a building boom, and he's just sort of abandoned me. We found another contractor, and then we applied for the same garage. And so my position is we're just trying to replace what is there. If you've been out to my house, you can see that it's unsightly the way it is. Frankly, I think it's dangerous. It's going to sooner or later collapse. I could take a different approach and sort of fix it from the inside out, but I think it would just be better to build a new garage and retaining wall. That way it will maintain the integrity of the property line and also Ms. Shaw's home. There's a considerable drop of approximately 4 feet, so I think it's important to do that. And my contractor is very confident that, he's done homes in the avenues for years, and that he can replace a retaining wall and not intrude on her property. The other thing that it's in the report, but it's also information that the city gave to me with respect to the requirements, specifically the zoning ordinance 21A.52, 21A.40, 21A.24.080. Those are the ordinances that deal with that building, and I understand that the building was constructed before there were ordinances, but that, for example, the garage needs to be 1 foot off the property line. That's what I've been told since 2015, and that's why our plans provide for that. In addition, the retaining wall will be constructed entirely on my side of the property. And I understand, I believe a few of the bases or position that Ms. Shaw took in her appeal was that, one, constructing a new garage would impair her property value. And I would say what is there right now impairs her property value. A new garage will actually increase her property value, as well as my neighbors. And Many of my neighbors are very anxious for me to have this project done. I am. I've got a 7-year-old son, and I can tell you my wife has been upset that we haven't had a backyard for him to play in, and that's valid. I also think that the way it is now, it's potentially dangerous, and all I want to do is get this project done. I've worked with the city for almost 5 years. I've done absolutely everything they've asked. They've approved my project twice, and I'd like to get going on it this summer and try to get it done. Any questions?
Commissioners, questions for the applicant? Not at this time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, I've got a couple of comment cards from folks who don't want to speak.
We need to have the appellant present the appellant's case.
Oh, right. All right. Would the appellant please come forward and speak to us?
Sorry, we got to figure out the flash drive thing too. I'll just do it this way, that'll be easier. Can you see what it says? No, number 2 up above.
That's the one I had.
Yeah, but it's number 2 PowerPoint and number 2 PDF.
Oh, not the PDF. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, and so I think it's...
Okay. I don't know if you can hear me, but my name's Jennifer Shaw. I'm the neighbor. And I think what I first want to say is thank you. I appreciate both the city's perspective as well as Mr. Robinson's. I, too, hope he gets a garage and that it works for him. Oh, is it not on? Can you? Oh, you don't think it's on there?
It's on. We can hear you.
No, it's the
The other on. See if I can.
Is there a better way?
I could turn it off.
I can't see anything.
Not sure how to deal with that.
I unplugged the cord, Marlon. Was there another way of dealing with it?
Is there a secret?
Oh, don't let it go to my head.
And then I have a PDF. Yeah, I have a PowerPoint one and a PDF one. Which is easiest? Because the number 2 PDF and the number 2
PowerPoint's going to work.
Okay, let's do that then. And just put slideshow.
There we go.
Okay, I apologize for that delay. Anyway, thank you for your time and energy, and I really appreciate the work that the city's done and the patience that Mr. Robinson has shown. So I'm here simply because I believe that the zoning ordinance exists for a reason. And I really think that if you replace an old structure with a new structure, the new structure should abide by code. And that's kind of the gist of my position. I think what you feel about this project kind of depends on your perspective. And my perspective is that the process was really flawed from my perspective, and the plans were very unclear. The evidence supporting a special exemption were inaccurate, and the standards were not met. So this is the project. This is the same picture that the staff showed you. And I think this is a view from First Avenue, and I think my position is that The original garage has a roof, and a roof has shingles, and it was set on a foundation. The shed that was added on the back was added later. It's different workmanship, it's different materials, it's a corrugated roof, it's not insulated, and it's not on a foundation. Whether you call these two buildings that are attached a garage or a garage and a shed may depend on how you feel about this. I feel like a garage, is it what it looks like from the outside, or is it how it functions on the inside? And a garage is technically where you store a motor vehicle. And this shed is not capable of storing a motor vehicle, and there's no access to do that. So that just gives you a visual, okay? This is the view from my house. Oh yeah, my house is on the left. The current retaining wall and the back of the shed is on the right. The distance between these two structures right now is 3 feet. And as Sean indicated, Mr. Robinson, it really is falling apart. So I don't argue that. You can see from here the property line. The property was surveyed, and that's not a point of discussion here tonight. But the current retaining wall and the current back of the shed are on my property, as survey has showed, although we need to kind of mediate about that, I think. Okay. This shows you from standing on the ground looking up the distance between the two buildings. My house at this point is on the right, the back of the shed is on the left. Although the distance between the walls is 3 feet, the distance between the wall and my eaves is 16 inches. His architectural drawing shows that the new structure will have an overhang. I do not know the distance of that overhang or whether that 16 inches will become even narrower. This is the view from inside my home. So my east-facing windows on the main floor look back against the back of this shed. I am not certain that having a new view of the same thing is particularly an improvement. It may be set back to 12 more inches, but it would be higher. So you can see from the view on the right the original back of the garage, which is a triangle shape, and then approximately 6.6 feet further towards my home is the shed. This is the 1950 Sanborn map that is referred to in the report. I believe it's a fire map, and the firemen had a reason to locate structures accurately. I believe this shows that the garage was there, the shed was not. I think that based on the shape of the accessory building and the fact that it's not near the retaining wall or the property line indicates that. This is my issue. And I don't necessarily want to read it to you, but I do believe that current zoning ordinance asks two things when new buildings are made. One of them is that they be no less than 1 foot from a property line, but the other is that an accessory structure must be 10 feet from a primary residence. This is perhaps my greatest concern, and what I've always disliked about the current arrangement. So, aside from issues of standards, I do believe there are issues of precedence. On our block, there has been a renovation of a home recently, which was replacement of a shed with a garage. As part of negotiations with the city, that property owner was asked to place his garage 10 feet from a neighboring residence, and that's what I would like to have happen too. So this design was required to meet code, and then there was issues around the fence and the sidewalk. So I kind of believe philosophically that consistent enforcement benefits everybody in our neighborhood. The additional standards of review that the city's report believes were met, and I disagree. These are some of my points. With my glasses, I can't quite see. But I believe by blocking my light, darkening my home, and reducing the usability of my interior space on the whole east-facing part part of my main floor does in fact cause a problem for me. I think there's significant concerns regarding fire hazard and safety. It is impossible to get a ladder from the east side of my property up to the second floor of my home. There are drainage issues. My home was built in 1910. It has a sandstone foundation. There is easily water coming through there, and drainage is a concern. I question some compatibility issues. The reason I would say that is there are no other garages on the block that are quite this size, and there are no structures on the block or in neighboring blocks that are quite this close to one another. I'm somewhat concerned about the issue of pollution and the idea of car exhaust being 3 feet from my windows, one of which we have a disabled daughter who lives in, one of those rooms. And I don't know if the plans are compliant with other standards. I'll just be honest about that. The issues have been heights and walls and grades and things like that. Part of my concern is that I think the city's decision was based on what was basically incomplete evidence. The project was described as a simple renovation. You replace a 500 square foot area with another 500 square foot area. I would contend the original garage is 380 square feet, and this is in fact new construction. The aerial photograph that was provided with the city's notice was misleading, and I will show that to you shortly. The site visit, there was one site visit done in 2016, and that was on Mr. Robinson's property. It was not on mine. It feels as if you might think, if you stood on his property, you might say, okay, I think I get this. He needs a garage. If you stood on my property, you might feel differently about the distance issue. I had complicated and confusing and conflicting emails from staff, so I couldn't understand really what was the old plan, the new plan, the negotiated plan, what was a real verbal drawing I could believe, and what was kind of, a real architectural drawing versus just a statement. And the fact that we haven't had complete architectural drawings have hindered a fully informed understanding of what this is. For instance, what is that, if he's doing an eave on the back, how far does it extend toward my home? If the back roof is raised, is that 2 feet, 3 feet, or 4 feet? That's what I look at. This is an example of the notice that we did receive from the city, and if you look carefully at it, you would believe that the garage is the subject that is being discussed. The yellow line crosses over the attached shed and does not cover the retaining wall. In summary, I really am not asking Mr. Robinson to not build. I'm not asking him to move it. I really, think there's reasonable space here. But I do believe that if you're applying for a special exemption from zoning, you kind of need special extenuating circumstances, a special reason why it's not possible to abide by zoning. And I can't see that, and maybe you do. And the issue of precedent is an issue for me. There's a current precedent in the neighborhood of this being workable. And I worry about the future precedent we set for other people who want to build this close to other structures. So I'm asking you to consistently enforce this. I suggest that there are models in the neighborhood that are workable. I don't believe this is simply about replacing a garage, but it's a garage and a shed. And I'm really grateful for you guys. I have additional photos if you're interested. Thanks.
Thank you. Commission, questions for the appellant? Not at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. I have about a dozen comment cards. 2 do not wish to speak, and I will read those. The other 10, I'll call your names, and I'd ask you to come up, and please try to limit your comments to 2 minutes maximum. First of all, Mary Ellen Sloan says, I support the appeal by Ms. Shaw to deny the special exemption. The setbacks currently required are important to the architectural aesthetics of the neighborhood. It allows each neighbor to enjoy their property. And can't quite read that. Encroachment, which could result in creating a fire hazard. I support the applicant for exemption to rebuild on existing footprint without the attached shed. Next is from David Blandford. I'm here to express my support for Jennifer Shaw, and the garage is too close. Thank you. All right. Sandra. And again, please identify yourselves with a full name as you approach.
My name is Sandra Seacrest Hatch, and I'm Jennifer's architect. I've been working with her for 15 years or so, and I helped her in understanding the process and putting together her PowerPoint, as well as supplying her the name of my surveyor, which, since we all were involved in the monster home, I haven't done a project without a survey since then. I think loosely it is a shed. I think it's more of a shack, and that is not a retaining wall. It's stacks of cinder blocks. And if a new retaining wall is put, even if it's a foot back, it will encroach on her property and its installation. So there has to be some negotiation going on there. I have done many, many projects over the years, and it has always been that if you tear something down and you build it up, you have to do it according to zoning and building requirements. And I would certainly call this new construction as opposed to a replacement. If it was exactly in the same footprint, I would say possibly. But that is not a shed made to be auxiliary storage for a garage. It's a shack. And so, any questions?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Jill Van Langeveld, please.
My name is Jill Van Langeveld. I am the current chair of the Greater Avenues Community Council. This is the second time I've been chair. The first time was in 2005 when I first realized that the city's way of making sure that their ordinances were followed. It's all complaint. It pits neighbor against neighbor. It is not a good situation. It doesn't make for good neighbors. It makes for arguments and discussions, sometimes horrible discussions. As I have looked at this, I also have looked and thought, all right, their ordinances are made for certain reasons. They are to protect both property owners so that you can see what to expect. If remodeled, have certain, if you're following the same footprint, they have certain regulations. If you tear everything down, you have to follow the new ones. And it just, if everybody would follow the rules, we could all be happy. Follow the regulations. They've been put in there for a reason, to give people space to where they're not feeling cramped. It's like with this, if he wants to put in a new garage, same size, this would then give her almost 6 feet of space between that accessory dwelling and her primary dwelling. Anyway, following the rules, following the regulations, following the ordinances that have been passed. And that's what I basically ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Genevieve Atwood, please.
Hi, I'm Genevieve Atwood, and I'm the owner of 1216 First Avenue, which is just almost directly across the street, slightly diagonal from 55 Virginia. And I'm the neighbor to 1204 First Avenue. And I'm certainly beholden to Landmarks Historical Preservation for enforcing the rules at my property, which was next 1204. So 1204 isn't an exact parallel. It had a garage closer to the 1860s adobe house, and it had fallen down. And the folks at 1204 wanted to put a non-complying replacement, within a foot of the property line, and Landmarks basically said, follow the rules. And I can't remember whether they said 8-foot setback or whether it was 10-foot setback, but it makes a huge difference. And the properties look terrific. It reinforces the historic look. And then also, there were issues with the wall. So I would like to cover two issues. I first would like to cover the wall. The west wall in the proposal here is considerably higher than 4 feet. I just want the staff to look at all retaining walls. Obviously, if you will consider the garage to be what everybody thinks is the garage, it looks like a garage, acts like a garage, has a vehicle in it, and the shed to be a shed, it happens that if you stand on the retaining wall, you can look into the shed because there's a hole in it. And you can see that the garage just basically is a cutout for the shed. It can't hold a car. It's a shed. So if you were to say that the shed is a shed and the garage is a garage, I think you could have it replaced on its present footprint legitimately, even though that is within the 10-foot zone. But with respect to the walls, the retaining wall is associated with the shed, and the staff has recommended 4 feet, and that doesn't make sense.
Would you please wrap up your comments?
Right.
Thank you.
A wall along with no setback from the sidewalk is not the way they treated 1204 First Avenue. It's made a huge difference to not have a wall directly along the sidewalk. But I'd love to talk about the garage, but I think that goes over my time.
It does.
Okay, but
Thank
I
you.
hope you'll look at my handout.
We've got this. It becomes part of the record.
Thank you.
And we will consider it in our discussion. Thank you. Dave Alderman, please.
Good evening. My name's Dave Alderman, and I live on 4th Avenue. I have a couple of comments on the plans as they were put out with the documents. First, I think we should step back from looking at footprints and neighbor to neighbor and instead see what this looks like to the rest of the world from the street or the sidewalk. I have a picture pulled from Google Earth that's passing around now. I apologize, it's not the best copy, but I believe you can see that with the retaining wall in place, which I understand is the plan to replace it, the lower addition is not visible from the street. The garage looks to be in compliance to anyone on the street or the sidewalk. The plans outlined in the document, though, would mean that the building would no longer appear compliant and would significantly change the streetscape. From this, it would give the appearance of a new non-compliant building. And appearances are what this commission deals with. My second issue is detailed under location in the staff report. Quote, locating the garage 10 feet from the appellant's property would require decreasing the length of the garage or moving it closer to the applicant's residence. Both of these changes would decrease the functionality of the garage, end quote. Note that it doesn't say it can't be done, just that it would burden the property owner. However, what's proposed is actually increasing the functionality of what's currently in place. So this argument about decreasing functionality is false. Zoning regulations are intended to protect neighboring property owners from adverse physical and economic impact. And the proposed structure would clearly adversely impact the property value of the neighboring house, and I believe others due to the streetscape changes. Conversely, the regulations on legal non-complying structures are intended to protect property owners from rule changes that have an adverse impact on their property. But zoning regulations are not intended to allow non-complying structures to be enlarged at the expense of the neighbors. As a maximum, I'd recommend that the new garage replacement should be no larger than the current one. If a larger garage is needed, then the burden should be placed on property owner, not the neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Lawler.
Hi there, Michael Lawler. I'm an architect and also a resident of First Avenue. I guess the question I had looking at what was presented was, I find the addition very troubling. What defines an addition? I see basically a lean-to or a corn crib built on top of an existing retaining wall. I see a roof that doesn't have any structure, that's got green corrugated plastic sort of wrapped over it. You see that a lot in Nebraska and Iowa, where I'm from. But that's my main question. And as I look at the site plan, it looks to me that there's honestly, it's pretty tight for a two-car garage, and I think that's what, that's what he's trying to build. And I can see why someone would want a two-car garage, but I don't think he's even got the backup pattern for a two-car garage. So my question is, maybe, we need to relook at this as maybe a one-car garage with a nice, side area instead of forcing that back 6'8" on Ms. Shaw. And honestly, from the point of property values, Avenues people always tell you that charm is really what sells properties. And I think, honestly, having that garage just rammed up right to the property line, it just kills the charm of his lot. And then it also hurts the value of her house having that, killing her natural daylight. So thanks for listening.
Good. Thank you. Lisa Yoder, please. Oh, no, Lisa Yoder does not wish to speak. You're welcome to come forward if you wish.
I just had the wrong address, so I'm glad you saw the comment.
Okay. I'll go ahead and read yours then. The applicant's desire to expand a garage footprint to that of an existing garage plus shed structure will make the structure too close to neighboring home. The applicant has room to enlarge his garage on his own property without encroaching on the zoning setback and creating a potential safety concerning access and the fire break between homes. Thank you. Last card is Cindy Cromer.
Hi again. I did expect to speak on this one, so I am prepared. I own 6 garages and 2 sheds in historic neighborhoods, and I pay a great deal of attention to what are called accessory structures, which are not eligible for tax credits. This petition is about 2 structures, a garage with an attached shed. The 2 parts do not appear to have been constructed at the same time, and they certainly don't have the same level of workmanship. For decades, my advice to property owners has been to work with non-complying structures like garages from the inside out. Then in 2012, and that's the handout that's coming around, this commission, to my delight, gained the authority to reduce setback requirements. You have approved some well-designed houses in the Capitol Hill, Avenues, and University Historic Districts, and almost universally, I agree with what you decided. Thank you. However, I see no reason to remove this existing garage. It's a historic structure. I view the request as an abuse of your authority by devaluing the adjacent property, especially when the adjacent structure is a contributing one to the Avenues Historic District. I thought you were requiring more information about the view from streetscapes in applications, but I don't see it here. It is seriously lacking in terms of what this is going to look like to the passerby, and I thought you had a conversation about getting more information on that, but it's certainly not evident in this one. And there's nothing from the fire marshal. The fire marshal is putting the kibosh on really great projects in this town, and I cannot imagine that he will put his stamp of approval on this one. There is no question in my mind, having lost a significant part of the value of my residence to a fire from a garage that was built on the property line, non-complying, that there's a big fire hazard. And putting it up against the property line is a problem. And then I find that the special exception fails on A through D. Thanks. I disagree with staff.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant care to come forward and respond or make more statements?
Just a few points. I know there was one comment of following the rules. I have very specifically followed the rules. I've spent, as I indicated, several years. And the ordinance that addresses accessory structures and my garage, specifically under paragraph 4, says that location of accessory buildings in rear yard shall be as follows. In residential districts, no accessory building shall be closer than 1 foot to a side or rear lot line, except when sharing a common wall. That's what my proposal is, a foot from the wall. So it absolutely does comply with the ordinance. With respect to the garage versus a shed, it's one structure. They were built at different times, I believe. From what I understand, the shed has been there since, the two sources I've talked to, since at least 1970 or 1965. You cannot access that rear portion outside of the garage. It is part of the garage. My garage easily fits 2 cars and 3 motorcycles in the front. That's where the front portion is. So it is part of the garage. It's been part of the garage since at least 1965. With respect to comments about the 10-foot setback issue, there was a home across the street down on First Avenue into U that there had been a shed there at some point that had fallen down. When the current homeowner, or actually the person who bought the home and then remodeled it, they did an application for a garage. So it was a new garage that was not existing, a very different situation than mine. It's my understanding that Ms. Shaw purchased her home in the 1990s, and my garage, as it is now, was there then. And it's not real credible to me to say, hey, I bought this home when this was there, it didn't bother me now, or then, now I see an opportunity to gain more space, that's why I'm going to object. All I want to do is follow what the requirements are. That's what I've done. And, you know, in terms of not being transparent or notice, I had people from the city come out to my home many, many times. I would say probably 15 to 20 times to discuss plans with my architects, with my contractors, to make sure that what we were submitting fully complied with what the city required. And we did that. Now, we did have to amend the plans. And again, I did that over and over and over until I satisfied the city and they issued their certificates of compliance. There was a comment about moving it forward. I can't move the garage forward. There's a statutory setback. The garage is pretty close to my house, and it's between 6 and 7 feet from the house, but between the house and the garage, there's a French drain. So I just cannot move it forward. All I'm asking is that the city, or that the commission uphold the city's issuance of the certificate of appropriateness. I want to make my neighborhood and my yard and my garage help everybody out in terms of property value, and it will look much better. The plans that we've submitted are essentially the same, the English Tudor style of my home, and so it's not going to look like, you know, a modern albatross. It's going to look just like my home. Any questions?
Yes, I do have a question, and I'm sure this will be a beautiful new garage. Virginia Street is a very busy street. It's very difficult to certainly back a car out onto Virginia Street, particularly in the morning as traffic is flowing downhill. You abut First Avenue, which is one of the quietest streets on the avenues. Have you considered relocating your garage and driveway to First Avenue? And if so, why not?
Well, we have looked at that option. The problem is Virginia Avenue is very busy, and I don't want my son out. We have a fairly small front yard. I don't want his friends playing ball out there and having it go into a busy street.
That's not what I asked. I asked, did you consider moving the garage to First Avenue? It would be in the same place, more or less, on your lot. You'd have a smaller driveway, you'd have less asphalt, easier to shovel, and far easier to pull your car in and out.
In speaking with the city initially, first of all, I wouldn't have a backyard, but in speaking with the city, that's not something that they would have approved. So we early on talked about that, but I was told that that's not an option. That if you're going to replace it, it has to be where it is, a foot off the property line. Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, we will go into executive session. Commissioners, what are your thoughts?
Is our only option here to do a thumbs up, thumbs down on the plans as presented?
Absolutely.
Or table? Or are we able to condition an approval on changes to the plans?
Microphone.
Okay.
So my thought is that I'm on board with the people who are saying that if you rebuild, you have to follow the rules and requirements. So I think that means that the whole garage can't be 1 foot from the property line. I think the garage probably has to be rebuilt on its original footprint. That's my thought.
And when you say garage being rebuilt on the original footprint, are you including the shed?
No, it's not a garage. It's just a little add-on thing. The actual garage is the rectangular or squarish structure that holds vehicles and other things.
Shelley, you bring up a really good point. When that garage was built, it met what would today be current zoning. It was within spitting distance of 10 feet from the neighbor's house to provide light, ventilation, and, and the health, safety, and welfare of the neighbor. And unfortunately, someone scabbed on the shed later, and even more unfortunately, the argument is being made that because this thing's been scabbed on there so long, it's in compliance. And I take issue with that. I think that rebuilding this garage is a tremendous opportunity to improve the quality of this neighborhood. And restoring that 10-foot that's required by the building code and alluded to in the zoning code would improve the neighborhood.
I agree.
And I'm dumbstruck that we're even talking about this here at this commission.
David, would now, if I'm understanding it right, the original garage, sound shed, is 6.5 feet or so back.
Plus, well, it's the distance of the shed plus the distance to the neighboring house. So it's like 3 feet.
There you go.
3 feet plus 6
Right.
feet, 2 inches or something. We're at 9 feet, whatever.
Right.
We're within that, within spitting distance of the way they
Got
did
it,
things
okay. I was
back then.
trying to understand your
Yeah.
definition of spitting distance. Okay. Victoria.
So if this is an appeal, though, at one point procedurally, this was approved with the one, by staff for 1 foot off. What was staff's thought process? Like why would it have been approved at that point? We have very capable and intelligent staff. Sorry, I should have asked this during, it just occurred to me. But why would it have been approved?
If you look at the drawings here, there's no drawing that shows a streetscape, and there's no drawing that shows the neighbor's house.
Context.
So staff would have no idea. They just assume we're replacing what's there.
I'm troubled just a little bit with, I certainly understand, I've always known that change is offensive to somebody. We'd all like everything to stay all the same, but I feel like I've been told here a few times in differing ways that variances and special exceptions are not playing by the rules, and I always thought that those things were included in the rules. And, there's special things for special situations, but certainly in the rules. And by granting the applicant's application twice, I understand, I would think that the staff we rely upon twice has told us that for whatever reason, this application meets with the rules, that we aren't breaking rules by approving what staff says doesn't break the rules. They're just using special rules. And if I misunderstand special exceptions and variances to be not playing by the rules, then I need a little education.
Well, I agree with you on that assessment, Stan. That's part of the way it works. No ordinance can foresee every indication. But at the same time, just because it was approved twice doesn't mean we have to agree with it.
Oh, no. Heavens, no.
My dad, when he was building things in the yard, used to joke, say, I don't understand, I cut it twice and it's still too short. And I'm wondering if that's the case here. Yes, we can consider the variances, the exceptions, but that doesn't mean that it was right. I think we need to look at this on its merits. And I think that was the basis of the de novo, what was the Latin term?
right.
Correct.
Yeah, that we're looking at this fresh. And we don't need to rely upon the staff's approvals previously if we don't wish.
Well, I never said we did.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm going to tell you one thing. I think they've spent one heck of a lot more time looking this over and talking and things than we can do tonight, tomorrow, and the next night.
I hope so.
Yeah,
Okay.
Don't disagree. I think my observation, we've, at times, Tom and I have tried to shorthand special exception, but I think what it boils down to is that it's something that's required for realization of the effort of the project, what they're proposing. Is that okay? Summary of it, and I don't think that's been proven tonight. They want to replace a garage, understandable. It has its deficiencies. The wall, certainly all those are deficiencies. I don't see anything that's compelling that says why this special exception should be granted.
Can we ask the city why they granted it?
Sure. So if you want to look at the special exception standards, they're towards the back in an attachment. Just fine.
They granted it. We just want to know why.
Sure. So there are 6 different standards And we found that the special exception complied with all the applicable standards. It's on page 104. The first is that it complies with the zoning ordinance. The second is that there is no substantial impairment of property value. The third is that there's no undue adverse impact. The fourth is that it's compatible with surrounding development. The fifth is that there's no destruction of significant features. There's no material pollution of the environment. And then again, it complies with the standards.
If I can add on to that, when staff administratively approves these, they send out a letter to abutting neighbors. If they don't receive any comment and they find that it meets those standards and they do a site visit and they've received information from the applicant, they would go ahead and approve that. Now, we don't deny at the staff level. The applicant, I think I know exactly what you're going to say. The applicant has claimed that she had emailed the staff member at that time, and I believe a phone call. And the staff member said that they didn't receive the email. So I think that there was something happened there with that. And in the second approval, it just got approved again. Based on the first approval. But the appellant certainly had contacted the city. The benefit of this appeal for the public and for everyone is to actually have a public hearing where you get, other experts in the neighborhood who walk the street. And so you get the benefit of hearing other facts related to these standards, which is why it's fresh and anew. And you can approve or approve with conditions on evidence and facts that you've heard from neighbors or the applicant. Just explaining process.
David, did you wish to have the applicant come back?
I think they...
We're cool? Okay. Commissioners, are there other comments while we're for discussion while we're in executive session here?
I'll queue up a motion.
Yeah, please do.
Based on the information presented and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Historic Landmark Commission deny the special exception for replacement of a non-complying accessory structure and additional height and request for certificate of appropriateness. The Commission finds that the project does not comply with review standards for special exceptions in 21A 52060 and 2152-030. The Commission also finds that the project does not comply with the applicable review standards of Historic Properties 21A 34020G. I'm going to be specific here. 21A 52060, general standards and consideration for a special exception. I believe that this does not comply with exceptions A through D. With respect to standard A, this does not comply with our 10-foot separation rule. With exception B, I believe this will further impair the value of the home to the west. As C, I think there is adverse impact, particularly the neighbor to the west. And condition D, this is not compatible at all with the building to the west.
Very good. We have a motion to deny. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second.
A substitute motion.
Okay, please go ahead.
We have to vote on the first one, don't we, Paul?
No, that's why the
Substitute motion supersedes any motion on the table.
I move that we deny the appeal, approve the underlying application with the following conditions. That the new structure is built with dimensions that are identical to the existing structure in terms of width, depth, wall height, ridge height, eave height, and that the building be located at least 1 foot off of the property line.
Paul, are you including the shed in your definition of exact dimension?
Yes.
All right, we have another motion. Do we have a second for Paul's motion?
I'll second Paul's motion.
Okay, so do we go to a vote on that one then?
Discussion and
Discuss.
then discussion and then vote.
Comments, please, on Paul's motion. Victoria?
Oh, I wanted to ask David a question about his motion, sorry. How do you justify the impairment to the neighbor's property values as a condition? It seems to me it's a net zero, at least.
Property value would remain the same or get worse because the new, there's no light, there's no ventilation, it's very little light and ventilation. It's
If that's the current, if
it's
that's
kind of primary in the building code that there's that 10-foot separation.
But I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how it's a worsening of that property value. It's a net zero to me. It would be an improvement if the materials there were of a better caliber. I'm having trouble with that criteria. So
Okay.
I don't feel like
respect
I can
that. Yeah.
degrade it at that point.
Yeah, I do have, I think I don't entirely agree with the standards that you've quoted, David, in the initial, but I do think that the shed was an addition. I question that, of course, it was built before there was a historic district in place, but it was in my view, it was initially incompatible with the neighborhood character at the time that it was constructed as an addition. I believe that standards A, in terms of compliance with zoning, that there would have been in place at that time an exception allowing somebody to build right up to the property line. I also believe that, again, standard D, compatibility with surrounding development, that this was not originally compatible. It's as it stands right now. It's in my mind, it's incompatible. And then the proposed replacement of it with something that is then built more integrally with the replacement garage is just not. It's attempting to try and again, tack something on to something that the original garage structure I've not heard, and I do not feel is incompatible with the overall development. So, I guess I'm going to propose an alternate substitution that basically says that I move that we deny the request for approval based on standards A and D of 21A 52060.
I'll second that.
Right.
Do you have rationale for that denial?
I'm sorry, what was that, Paul?
Your findings to support that denial to that motion.
That the existing structure is not in compliance with the zoning ordinance because it is the addition, that is. It is within the 10-foot setback required between primary structure and an accessory structure on adjoining property, and D, that it is incompatible with the character of the neighborhood, which distinct from the garage itself, which I believe is compatible with the surrounding development. Does that respond? Thank you.
Point of order. I am virtually certain you cannot have two substitute motions.
I'll look into your policies and procedures, but I do not believe that there is a limit on them. We do not strictly follow Robert's rules.
I'm pretty,
Plus, I think that David has
can't-
withdrawn, because he seconded the new motion. I think he's withdrawn his. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So there's two.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
I don't think that's at all accurate.
Well, you know,
Otherwise, you'd just have,
Seconding a different motion.
Paul, my,
I'm fully fine with voting for the two, the original proposal and the substitute personally, if the rest of the commission is.
Well,
Yeah, David withdrew his.
I'm fully prepared to vote on the first two.
Well, was the first one superseded legally by the
While you're
second
figuring that out, I have a question for Paul.
Go.
Paul, would you consider adding to your motion, your substitute motion, that we see a streetscape of the new design? I think that's what's missing in this application.
so you would want the applicant to come back to
Yes.
to landmarks?
Yes.
Sure.
All right, so where do we stand here? Is that,
seems like
is
Paul-
that a fourth
Paul-
substitution?
Paul, isn't that that's a total change of your motion, though? Isn't it? Because your motion was to approve or to support staff recommendation, which was approval of the special exception. Yeah, but even, well, the amendment.
Opposed to tabling
Unless you
it.
amend it to, yeah, if you're expecting it to come back to here, then that's, doesn't seem like it connects. I like it when we twist them all
So
up.
can we just walk these all back and kind of start them fresh? David could retract his.
That's up to the makers of the motion. So your part F, paragraph 28K of your rules states substitute motions. A substitute motion may be made prior to a vote on the original motion. A second is required on the substitute motion before a vote on the substitution motion can occur. That's it. There's no limitation on how many you have on the table. We do not follow Robert's rules strictly.
Well, in that case, it seems like Tom's is the effective motion. And we had a second on that, I believe.
I'd be happy to just do an infinite series of substitute motions just to make everybody's life totally miserable.
You want to see if this one stands or fails, or do you wish to? Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. Would you kindly restate that for us, Tom, now that we're totally confused?
Okay. I move that the application be denied based on 21A 52060 of the general standards and considerations for special exceptions. Standard A, compliance with the zoning ordinance and district and district purposes, that it impinges upon the 10-foot, that the addition impinges on the 10-foot required setback between primary structure on an adjoining and an accessory structure, and that standard D, it is that addition is currently incompatible with the surrounding development, and that incorporating or including the proposed addition with the original garage is, in my mind, incompatible.
Okay.
Can I just clarify one part of your motion?
Yes.
You're saying that it doesn't comply with standard A because it impinges on the 10-foot setback,
Yes.
but that modification is being requested as part of the special exception. So do you have more evidence to give? I mean, that's why the special exception is there, so that you can actually get an exception from the 10-foot. So is it that
That's the very point of having item 19.
point of it? So is it that I think we would need more there from you as to why there is Right.
I'm sorry, what was that, Paul?
More,
It would have to fail to meet the special exception standard because that is the exact relief that they're looking for.
All right,
right.
fine.
So is there something with the 10-foot that the proposed use and development will be or not be in harmony with the general specific purposes? Because in the staff report, staff is saying that the applicant's proposal itself is meeting the purpose of the preservation overlay. And then out all the points of the preservation overlay. We are also saying that the applicant project is compliant with the purpose of the SR1A. And there is a definition of maintaining unique character in older neighborhoods that display a variety of yards, lot sizes, and bulk character. I think I would like to clarify more from you as to how it is not meeting that.
Well, let me jump in then, and I look at it, it's an old structure. I do not believe that it was ever approved by anybody within the city, whether it was the building department or others in zoning. And so that's really the basis why I feel like it is not in, that the existing addition to the garage is not in compliance. Just because it's been there for a long time doesn't mean that it was approved at one point, that it gained approval over time in my mind. And that's why I guess I'm pushing back on that standard A. Does that make
it wouldn't be in harmony?
That it is, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Richardson seconds the motion to deny.
Question on that, Tom. So would it be fair to say that what you are looking at, really the problem with the application is wrapping that incompatible shed into the request?
Correct.
So that if
that was originally a chicken coop and then I decided to put siding on the chicken coop and then now it's part of the garage. It was never part of the original structure. It was scabbed on, as clear by both the quality of the construction and the character of the discussion of the construction.
And if the application was not trying to include that, it might be looked upon more favorably.
Absolutely. In my opinion, only my opinion, but I
just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
That was my understanding. We have a motion and a second. We have a vote, please, starting at the far end with Mr. Penfold.
Adams, nay.
Harding, aye.
Victoria, no.
Esther, no.
No.
Aye. Shepherd, aye.
Richardson, aye.
What was your vote? Tied. So we have tied. Peters, aye. So the motion to deny carries.
Okay.
Let me get the.
Read the fine print.
For what?
Got to read the.
Read the fine print.
Appeal of Historic Landmark Commission decision. Anyone aggrieved by the Historic Landmark Commission's decision may object to the decision by filing a written appeal with the appeals hearing officer within 10 calendar days following the date on which a record of decision is issued. The applicant may object to the decision of the Historic Landmark Commission by filing a written appeal with the appeals hearing officer or the mayor within 30 calendar days following the date on which a record of decision is issued. Thank you very much. We will move on. Do we want a quick break before our final one? Or should we just go for it?
Go for it.
Muscle through, okay. Our final is National Register. National Register nomination. Hey, folks, please carry your conversation outside. Thank you. National Register nomination for Steiner American Building at 505 East South Temple.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. So this evening, we have a request from the State Historic Preservation Office to review a National Register nomination for the Steiner American Building, which is located at 505 East South Temple, and this building was constructed in 1967. Here's a historic photo I received from the county archives, and this building was designed by Utah architect William Browning as the headquarters of the American Linen Supply Company, which is also known as ALSCO, which you may be familiar with that business. And the business was owned by the Steiner family, hence the name. So here are a few more photos of the building up for nomination. Some more current photos. And the building has been nominated by CRSA Architects under Criteria C, or that the property embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or represents the work of a master. And so it's an important work of modernism by William Browning, and then it's a unique example of Wrightian architecture with elements of some early deconstructivism. So as a certified local government, the state has asked that you all provide feedback on the nomination using this evaluation criteria here on the screen. And so please let me know if you have any questions before you discuss. And then we also have the architect, John, who nominated this building to come up and speak tonight. Thanks.
Now let's have the architect come forward, please, if they wish, and talk to us about the building.
Yeah, my name is John Iwanowski with CRSA Architecture. I didn't prepare a formal presentation today, but I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, could you quick hit the bullet points on the criteria for qualification? Not all of us had a chance to visit the building.
So yeah, talking about integrity, this building has a high amount of integrity, both on the exterior and on the interior. It looks virtually identical to how it looked when it was constructed in 1967. Most of those are original materials that haven't been replaced over the years. We have described the property in the packet that you received, and I can answer any questions about the general building description. Significance and context. So we kind of kicked it around which criterion to use, if it should be A and C. We're saying it's significant under criterion C. Bill Browning was really a master modernist, and I think a lot of his buildings have either been demoed or altered over the years. And so I think this is a very significant record of the work of a great modern architect. And then sources, we have both primary and secondary sources in the application, including Bim Oliver's interview of the architect. Bill is still alive, and I've been meaning to connect with him to talk about the building. We just haven't quite met up yet. And then we provided photos, maps, drawings in the application.
Okay. Not that it's important, just curious, how much did it cost to build this back in '67? Any idea?
I can't remember. It was in the tens of thousands of dollars, I think. I mean, it wasn't a lot. It was. It's not a very. The method of construction isn't very elaborate. It's a CMU wall with a brick veneer. The brick is in an interesting vertical running bonded pattern, and it's articulated. Every third block is kind of had a different articulation from the facade. But
is the building currently occupied?
It is currently being renovated by a new owner who bought it directly from the original owner.
What was the name of the structure that they demolished?
It was the Weir Cosgriff Mansion.
You know, this application or this thing, I'm not sure, I've never heard of, I mean, I haven't been involved with one of these, but it reminds me of the first one that we took up tonight about painting a 50s apartment white. And it almost hurts me to reward American Steiner or Mr. Browning with a sort of an award for tearing down one of the most beautiful buildings on South Temple. I don't know, it's just funny to me to National Historic designation to something that's secondary to what we're really...
You know, Stan, you bring up some really good point. I had a wonderful conversation with architect Stephen Smith in the last year or two, and he talked about the Steiner building, and that he was on the Planning Commission at the time, I believe, and that they really struggled with trying to use the Cosgriff Mansion for the Steiner's offices, and that the architects at that time worked pretty hard and finally gave up and came up with this solution. And that the Planning Commission, this is before the Landmarks Commission existed, really thought that the classical colonnade, the use of brick, the rhythm of the windows and all of that was appropriate for a historic area, historic street. And I just thought it was an interesting little tidbit. Be interesting to go back and find the old Planning Commission minutes on that one.
I'd also note that the period of significance of the South Temple Historic District has been updated to, I believe, 1966. It was recent in the last few years. So there are contributing modernist structures along the street.
Although, Stanley, your question does make me wonder what was at the IBM building location and Governor's
Plaza. That took down two beauties.
Did they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the one up on, what, 7.5 East South Temple, that new insurance big building across the street from Jimmy Mitsunaga and Galen Ross's old office.
Yeah, the 709 building.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, change is difficult, but again, giving awards to people who do that sometimes crosses my...
Yeah, I understand that.
I don't know if this is an award. I don't know, maybe this helps somebody or helps something, but it's not what I thought we were here for.
We consider a...
John, are you directing the renovation work?
Yes, we are also the design architect.
Okay, do you want to describe that a little bit? And I understand that, I mean, apparently you're working with the State Preservation Office to secure tax credits for the renovation of this, and that's hence the nomination.
Yes, correct. We have been in consultation with SHPO throughout the whole process. They've made a couple site visits, and we are applying for tax credits on the project. I don't know how much you want to know about the project itself.
Not really. I'm just kind of curious. You know, obviously the compliance with the standards. I mean, that's the goal of that, or that's the requirement to.
Yeah.
Is it moving well?
It is. It's going well. They're a pretty sympathetic owner by my standards to what is there. They understand the significance and kind of the cachet of the historic asset. There are obviously some changes that have to be made to turn it into a more modern office, but the appearance of the exterior, for instance, won't really be noticeable, especially along the street frontage. There will be a new accessible ramp on the north facade, which is hardly visible from
kind of a parking
from
lot
the
side,
avenue.
isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, and then on the interior, there's a little bit more renovation going on, but it follows the standards for rehabilitation.
Two questions. One is, will the fountain be restored?
It will not.
Bummer.
The fountain actually.
No deal.
My understanding, and I don't know if this is correct, is that the fountain was actually removed pretty early on in the life of the building for maintenance.
It went away in the time I've lived in Salt Lake City. In fact, in the time I've lived in the Avenues 20-something years, and when I first moved to the Avs, it was operational.
Huh, really?
Yeah.
I thought it was earlier than that.
Yeah. The other question is, I think criterion C for the architect works, but did you consider criterion B for the Steiner family and as well as A, for events in the city?
We did. With A, our argument was going to be that this kind of represented a real galvanizing moment, both for preservationists in the city where Cosgrove Mansion was demolished, but also kind of that progressive reach of downtown through the South Temple district with commercial buildings. So we think the construction of this building was significant under criterion A, in my opinion, for the development of Salt Lake City in general.
Made a good argument here for that. Yeah.
We were in consulting with SHPO, they encouraged us to just go for it under criterion C. But
thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, other questions for John? All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We have two public comment cards. I'd like to invite Genevieve Atwood back up.
I'm Genevieve Atwood, and I live on the Avenues. I had not focused what building this is. And Mr. Adams, you are absolutely correct. The idea that they would be rewarded with tax credits. So my mother was a close friend of the Cosgriffs, Sturdivant's Cosgriffs. I'd have to do the genealogy, but I got to go into that building as a child. In fact, I watched the coronation of Queen Elizabeth there. It was, which of course is that same feel. And the idea that we would reward the tearing down of that. And then I served in the legislature, 74, 76, 78, when we were still tearing down these buildings. And, someone like the Hogels would just say, the night before something would go into effect, they just took out the building. I mean, no. You just shouldn't do this. You just shouldn't reward misbehavior.
Thank you. Sandy?
Yeah, my name is Sandra Hatch. I live at 1141 Michigan Avenue. I want to say ditto to Genevieve. This is what was the pivotal point for creating the Heritage Foundation and the preservation movement in general, was the horror of losing that building and having the Steiner. Now, you can't say it has its place now, but I don't know that we should reward. And you might get a little bit of backlash from the people that worked really hard to get to set up our preservation groups in Salt Lake City, because that was the demolition of the Cosgrove. And the building of the Steiner was definitely a pivotal moment for this city.
Huh. The Glen Canyon Dam of Salt Lake historic movement.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay. And it set that precedence for IBM, as it went on,
Yeah.
My husband's grandfather's house was torn down on, it's now just a grassy knoll adjacent to the church's garden down there. And it just, we lose too much of what gave us some substantial community connections. And I just don't think you should reward. I'm not saying anything else should be done, but tax credits for a property that just was pivotal in the preservation movement in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to concur with Ms. Hatch and Ms. Atwood, but I'd like to say that was then and this is now. And I move that we forward a positive recommendation to the SHPO to place 505 East South Temple on the National Register of Historic Places.
We get a second on that, please.
I second that.
Have a motion and a second to approve this this nomination. May we have a vote, please? I'm going to start with Paul.
Aye.
Yep, please.
Esther, aye.
Victoria, aye.
Aye.
I'm still thinking.
We'll come back to
From
you.
these guys.
Okay.
Richardson, aye.
Shepherd, aye.
And before I say aye, I'm going to absolutely concur with David's initial remark. It was a terrible loss. I almost wish that we were going for Category C because it was so pivotal for that reason in both A and anyways, but aye.
Nay.
The motion carries. We will forward that nomination. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Commissioners, thank you very much. Good discussions tonight. Paul and Michaela, thank you, and staff.
It's helpful to have people around to know our house.